Back in the studio with us is Dion Pico, Senior Director of Strategy, Progress DataDirect. I would like to hand today's session over to Dion. Welcome, Dion.
Thank you very much, Marlis. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody, I guess, depending on where you're located, of course. Glad to be with you here for part 3 or episode 3 of our Summer of Connectivity series. For those of you who've attended a few in the past, you know they're very, very specific to a few point solutions that we've offered, and the reason we're focused on those is that we see a lot of interest. We see a lot of people coming to us with these problems, and so we're focused very much on these type of point solutions as part of this summer series, really as a way of educating you on some of the value DataDirect can bring, some of the things we hear and see as well. Short and sweet, just like the other two in the series have been as well. So I hope you'll join me for the next 20 to 30 minutes here, and I'll take you through some of the cross-platform SQL Server integration issues that we tend to see. So really, as I talked about, this Summer of Connectivity series really focused on those common problems in data that we really make easy with DataDirect as well. So it really pertains to the portfolio itself. You know, with our webinars, we like to do probably one of 3 things, whether it's educate you on some large market problems, entertain you a little bit with some jokes, or really, really educate you about the product solutions themselves. And this one certainly falls into that last bucket. So there'll be a few product plugs here and there as well. So I hope you don't mind. With that, let me kind of take you through some of the things we see over and over again, all through 2014, 2013 as well. The first, I think, obviously with Microsoft's, end of life of Windows XP, some of the failed experiments they've had in the operating system arena as well, the cost of upgrades and everything else you can consider, we'd see a lot of customers looking to really move away the majority of their Windows licenses onto something that's a little bit more cheap, a little bit more value-oriented. Linux seems to be the most common, and within that we see a lot of Red Hat, quite honestly, but it's not exclusive to that in any way. Some of it, of course, is really as they move towards more of a virtualized infrastructure. They're looking at a different architecture as well, but it really seems to pertain more to cost, is what I've seen in the past, especially when they're already facing an expensive upgrade cycle anyway. They certainly look at that and say, well, for maybe a little bit more, I can make the transition to Linux and reduce licensing costs moving forward as well. The second, of course, and I hinted about it with the virtualization side of things, but folks are really undertaking, well, they're really current generations of applications, I guess, when you get right down to it. But as we say, next generation's applications, much more designed for the BYOD employee or the consumer that is, or the customer that is anywhere. And, you need to design these applications to be very responsive, optimized for the web, optimized for mobile as well. And so you see a lot of folks really starting to re-architect their applications. A lot of folks moving more towards a HTML5, JavaScript-centric front end. And we see a lot of interesting technologies happening on the back end as well. Certainly things like Node.js, for example, being very popular these days. But as people are starting to re-architect their applications, they're taking advantage of the fact that, well, at one point they might have been much more, let's say, .NET-centric. Today, they're starting to use much more, broad, open, or broadly compatible standards. So as I said, HTML5, JavaScript certainly comes up all the time, and still a lot of Java and other technologies on the back end as well. So it's a good chance for them, of course, since they're undertaking that re-architecture, to also look at, their COGS budgets and everything else involved in that. And then the third one, we see a lot of customers who are really looking to just lower the cost of their database licenses, moving to something like SQL Server from, say, an Oracle as a way of lowering some costs, as an example. It's a trend we certainly see. I think everybody's cost conscious as part of the modern competition. SQL Server certainly has matured over the years as well to provide them with a lot of the capabilities that they're looking for. And so it certainly makes a lot of sense for some companies, depending on their use case, of course. What happens across all of this is really the need for much more cross-platform integration of SQL Server. They may have started with Linux or Unix applications that were connected to Oracle, and now they're moving to SQL Server, but maintaining those Linux and Unix applications. They may be moving off of Windows infrastructures onto more of that Unix, Linux, and even Mac type of infrastructure as well, as part of either a cost reduction or a re-architecture. And from those platforms as well, really need to make sure that they're integrated very well with SQL Server too. So those tend to be the three major transitions we see happening out there today. What ends up happening is that we see a number of challenges. The major three, and I'll talk about one other at the end, that seems to be much more emerging right now, particularly with the move to web and mobile. But the first three, of course, is really people are always performance conscious. Performance equals dollars. If your solution runs half as fast and uses twice as much memory as an example, you're likely going to need twice as much hardware and maybe twice as many admins to maintain that infrastructure uptime. And so performance is critical in many, many scenarios involving data, particularly as the number of customers are ramping up, the volumes of data are increasing. And so we see customers coming to us with maybe they've tried the out-of-the-box driver from SQL Server on maybe a Linux deployment and ask, how can I take advantage of concepts like bulk load to increase my performance, something that you don't normally get with the vendor-supplied connectivity options, as an example. Others may say, I'm really looking for a way to connect to SQL Server from other platforms that are just not supported by the vendor. Microsoft does a fantastic job of making SQL Server support work really well with Microsoft technologies. They do have a Linux driver as well, although it has very limited features in its implementation. But when you start going to some of the other platforms, maybe in AIX, or maybe you're moving to Mac, for example, how do you connect to SQL Server from those platforms where there isn't an obvious connectivity option available? And then finally, I have security standards. I have security processes in place, and the vast majority of my architecture takes advantage of it. Maybe it's for single sign-on support as an example. Windows Authentication in particular seems to be the hot topic here, and companies asking us, how can I really support those security standards that my company employs already, like Windows Authentication, from other platforms such as Unix, Linux, and Mac, of course. So we see those three problems coming up quite a bit, and I really just want to take you through how DataDirect has solved some of those. And I'll hint at one more at the end that we see certainly emerging as well, and kind of give you some insight into what we're doing there, both what's available today and where we're going as well. So let's hop into it. The first one, as I said, wanting to connect from a large number of platforms. Well, the reality is, from a DataDirect perspective, we've always taken a very heterogeneous approach. We do support all of the major platforms, including Windows and Linux and Unix, and we have Mac in beta now for anybody who's certainly interested in connecting from the Mac to databases like SQL Server or MongoDB or many other data sources that we're working on. All of our connectivity options are 32-bit as well as 64-bit. I know with Microsoft, as an example, I do not believe they ship a 32-bit driver for their Linux deployment. So this gives you a good option if you have 32-bit applications that would really depend on that. And then finally, we support the three major standards today in data, which is ODBC, JDBC, as well as ADO.NET, for anyone who needs the latter, of course. And we've also added support as well for all of our data sources available through our cloud service, all based on OData. So anybody who has the need for really a mobile or web integration where a driver cannot be installed, a mobile phone is a great example. OData, great solution, great interface, all built on REST and JSON that really is really focused on data integration as well. The other thing I will say is that, and this is certainly if you're an ISV, if you're building applications, I think you'll really appreciate this, although certainly many IT departments will as well. With the DataDirect solution, there's really just one component to install. You don't need to install separate components for each different version of the database you're using. So one driver, and you pick whether you want, the 32, 64-bit, whatever platform from, AIX to Solaris. You pick that one driver, and we'll make sure it works with SQL Server 2000 right up to SQL Server 2014 as well. So much easier to manage because you have a lot less moving parts. Really easy to maintain from your perspective, as well as being much easier to test because you can really depend on our testing to ensure you have compatibility as well. So when it comes to broad platform support, it's certainly one area we like to differentiate ourselves, and I think one major area that many customers of ours find certainly very, very compelling as well. The second one we see, we talked about bulk load there earlier. Many typical use cases for bulk load. I'm sure all of you here on the line today will be familiar with at least a few of these. But just to kind of review again, anytime you're doing data warehousing kind of jobs, bulk loading of data files into a data warehouse, tremendous performance increase if you can take advantage of that bulk loading support. Data migration is another great example where you want to really move or copy data from one database to another, where you have large volumes of data and you're not worrying about data consistency as much because you had that guarantee in the former database. You really just need a fast way to load and do a copy here really quickly. Another great example for data migration. Replication is the same way. Disaster recovery is the same way. We often see batch processes also where they're having to load in an enormous volume of data before they can build the report. We've seen circumstances where a customer's batch reports were taking in the order of 12 hours. And simply by using a DataDirect solution, no other coding required, no database optimization or query optimization required, able to move that really from a 12-hour time frame to less than 2 hours. So a very quick way to take advantage of the performance benefits, particularly when you have large volumes of data. So as I said, DataDirect, we support bulk load operations on all platforms, not just on Windows. So again, unlike the vendor supplied driver, you get bulk load across the board, again, on all platforms. The bulk load is also built into the driver. It's not a separate utility. So instead of you having to construct custom processes, you're really leveraging the driver capabilities. You can build it into your application logic. It's much easier to manage for a variety of use cases as well. And then finally, I talked about already, our bulk load performance, one area we spend a lot of time on here at DataDirect is really making sure that we have the performance advantage. In tests that we've done, and certainly, I recognize there's a bias in any time a vendor does its own testing, but really on the testing we've done, we've seen performance increases of well over 500%. We have customer stories, both referenceable and non, that really validate this perspective as well. So when you consider moving to another platform, certainly one of the big fears, of course, is a drastic reduction in performance. So it's not just about compatibility, but also performance. And I think with DataDirect, makes it seamless across the board that you're going to maintain the level of performance you've really come to expect from either your older database or your older platform that you were running on as well. The second, security integration that we talked about a bit earlier. This is critical from a cross-platform integration perspective as well. Three things here I want to call out from a DataDirect perspective. The first is that we do support the OS authentication. So whether you're using Kerberos as an example or Windows Authentication, we seamlessly integrate with that with all of the DataDirect drivers across all of the platforms as well. So you can certainly pass in your Windows Authentication credentials and have that authenticated with SQL Server as well, even if you're on the Mac, even if you're on Linux or AIX or whatever your platform might be. The second is that in addition to just authentication integration, we also make sure that we support full, really data on the move kind of encryption as well. So all data exchange between the application and the database with DataDirect will automatically be encrypted using TLS or SSL if you enable that feature as well. So really the best way to integrate with the database using its encryption and security protocols. And then finally, the architecture itself of DataDirect is special in that we actually don't need client libraries that you need to install because we're really communicating using the database's wire protocol driver. And so eliminating that additional client library really eliminates another point of vulnerability in your application stack as well. So you're really speaking to the database in its language. You're really leveraging all of the database techniques as well that really makes sense from a security perspective. So highly secure both from an authentication as well as data in motion and data at rest perspective. I said performance is king. I wanted to validate that, and I apologize that some of these are going to be hard to read as well, but you take a look at some of these, whether it's some of our use cases like really mimicking transaction processing use cases, or really looking at more of a batch cycle use cases that you see in some of these. What you'll see across the board is that our throughput, we're really blazing fast. I mean, it's something we're very proud of here. It's something I call attention to for anybody who's listening today who do have performance issues. Don't think about having that the only way of optimizing your performance is optimizing connection strings and optimizing database queries, or even optimizing your database and throwing more hardware at it, simply by replacing your driver component, which, by the way, up to 70% of your performance can be eaten by your driver. It's something to keep in mind. The performance advantage of DataDirect really pays for itself in a very short period of time, either through less hardware being used, less management, less debugging, less optimization. So it really, performance is king for so many of our customers, and it's really one of our pillars that we differentiate ourselves on as well. Happy to send anyone more information on this if they want to take a look. I think, however, you look at the graphs, you can see that across the board in the majority of use cases, we're demonstrating more than 100% performance increase versus, the standard out-of-the-box driver or some of our competitors. The same thing goes on the CPU side as well as the resource side. When you look at things like batch updates, for example, the numbers are off the charts. It actually is about a 500% increase, 500% savings in terms of your CPU as well as memory. So in addition to driving more than 100% improvement, we're doing so by using 2, 3, and 4 times less memory and less CPU in the process as well. So it really speaks to the quality and the tuning that goes on behind the scenes here as well. And then finally, I talked about one other use case. So those talk about the major use cases, really the performance, compatibility, bulk load, and some of the security things we've talked about. The other one I'm starting to see a lot of, and it's really been an area of innovation for us as well, is companies have moved to the cloud. So particularly if I'm an ISV, I have my application running in the cloud, or maybe it's running on a mobile device, but I need to access SQL Server data that resides on-premise. Again, I say ISVs because they're often selling software that needs to integrate both with cloud data as well as on-premise data. BI tools being a great example. So maybe you're a Tableau Online customer as an example, or maybe you're using some other cloud-based BI tool. How do you get access to that data that resides behind your firewall? So in addition to simply SQL Server drivers that you can embed anywhere and leverage yourself, we have a new service called DataDirect Cloud. For those of you not familiar with DataDirect Cloud, what it basically does is that it gives you really one driver that can access all of the data sources that DataDirect Cloud supports. So instead of let's say you had SQL Server, MongoDB, and maybe Cassandra that you needed to connect to, with the traditional driver model, you would actually be maintaining 3 different drivers, so 3 different components that you would have to embed and upgrade and manage and so on and so forth. With DataDirect Cloud, it's one driver. It's one ODBC or one JDBC driver that speaks to the cloud service itself. And then the cloud service can speak to your Cassandra, your Mongo, your Salesforce, or any other number of connections. DataDirect Cloud has this feature. Think of it like SQL over HTTPS. So it's, SQL over the web that allows us really to work very nicely with firewalls. So instead of having to open up new ports in your firewall or ask your customers to open up new ports in your firewall or change network settings and all of that, DataDirect Cloud can really work very nicely with your firewall to give you access to that on-premise data. So through this cloud service, not only can you talk to these cloud SaaS applications, CRM applications, and so forth, you can actually tunnel into on-premise and speak to your big data solutions, your NoSQL solutions, your SQL Server solutions, which of course is what we're talking about here. So the other thing that you can combine with that is that I said you would install one driver, ODBC or JDBC. Well, DataDirect Cloud also supports OData. And so imagine you're an enterprise IT shop that wants to mobile enable your workforce. You're going to give them, they have their mobile phones, they have their tablets, they're on the go, and yet 90+% of all the information they need is still contained on premise. Maybe it's important information such that's contained in your data warehouse. Information like the customer I'm about to visit, what have they purchased from us already? What are they licensed to use? Well, if you're going to expose that, most IT departments certainly don't want to open up more ports in their firewall, more security holes. They don't want to build up servers that will be publicly exposed for you to integrate through REST APIs with your mobile devices as well. There's a lot of work that goes into that. So again, with DataDirect Cloud, you can really expose your database to the cloud service using that SQL over HTTPS functionality. On the front end, you're really supporting a standard OData interface. And so now that mobile workforce, you can build applications to your heart's content that leverage REST over JSON to speak to all of this wealth of on-premise data. You don't need to install servers or manage it. Again, you don't need to change your network settings. So it's a very nice solution to that problem as well. Quite honestly, I'm seeing more interest at the moment from ISVs. I think every ISV we speak to certainly feels the pain of trying to solve this. But again, from an enterprise perspective as well, I think the use cases, they make a lot of sense to me. They're very obvious, and we're seeing some growing interest there too. So wanted to sort of bring that one up. For those of you who may be familiar more so with DataDirect from a driver perspective, DataDirect Cloud can certainly offer you some additional value that you're not going to get with the driver. As I said, the on-premise access as well as OData support. And just a quick highlight there. So that's what I wanted to cover today, just a little bit of insight into what our SQL Server drivers can really do for you. Integrate with SQL Server from any platform, including web and mobile devices directly. So I think that's a great feature there. Whether it's on-premise or in the cloud, you can actually leverage a single interface to your data. You're not managing multiple components. You can really make sure your applications exist nice in a hybrid environment. Windows Authentication support from all platforms, not just Microsoft. Very, very important to many customers who are really starting to kick off that cross-platform integration project. Bulk load support, as I said, to really drive performance increases of over 500% with lower CPU and memory usage. Your results may vary. It really depends on your use case and everything else, but I certainly would expect everyone to see a significant performance increase from this solution. And anyone who's interested, if you want to try the driver itself, head on over to progress.com. You can, from our main products menu, click the Data Sources tab, and you can see all of the data sources we have available. SQL Server is there, of course. If you wanted to try DataDirect Cloud as well, you'll see that on the progress.com products menu as well. So feel free to sign up. Both the driver as well as DataDirect Cloud are free to try. So I encourage you all to do that. And that's it. That's our three-part series, really speaking to some of the point use cases. The first one, we spoke about Salesforce and really opening up that Salesforce data silo. Last week, my good friend and colleague Sumit really talked about unifying access to your Oracle data. And then finally today, we've covered some of the value of the SQL Server integration and really what it can do for you. So anyone who's missed and is interested in those first three sessions, they are all available on demand on progress.com as well. And with that, that's what I had today. I see we have a few questions in the chat window here that I'll cover. anyone else who wants to send us some questions, I'll certainly respond either directly in email or through our blog as well. But the first question I got is, what will be the license model for this? I think if you've done business with Progress in the past, you know we're certainly very flexible. We want to find something that works for you. So whether it's a perpetual license that you prefer, more of that traditional software licensing model where we can do something on a core or a server basis, whatever you need, we certainly can do that. We also offer subscription models as well. So if you want to come in at a per user subscription or some sort of limited time window subscription as well, we're certainly happy to do that as well. So very flexible. We really want to find something that works best for our customers. So I'd encourage you to reach out to us, and we can certainly discuss that some more. And what would be the best way to install DataDirect driver? Install in DB server or separate server independent from the database server? I think that really depends. What I would say is that from an implementation perspective, I don't think I would look to me as certainly the expert in that way. We do have experts who'd be willing to come and take you through all of that at no charge, of course. I think it really depends, though, on your circumstance, on your deployment, and what you're trying to achieve. So I think you want to consider things like what aspects of the query is the driver doing versus what aspects are we pushing down to the server. Many times with DataDirect, we're pushing as much down to the server as we possibly can, and so co-locating it with the server may not actually add a whole lot of overhead because the server is going to do the majority of the processing. You know, if you're using some of the emulated features that may be available, so oftentimes with DataDirect drivers, for example, if your data source is missing a function, maybe a piece of SQL, maybe a certain type of join, for example, we'll emulate that in the driver, but the driver obviously has to do a lot more processing to do that. In that circumstance, you may find that running it on a separate server is better because you start to distribute that workload a little bit more easily or a little bit more evenly and make it a bit more predictable for your database as well. So it really depends, but certainly can connect you with some experts to take you through that as well. And one other I had, is it right that it's an add-on to Progress OpenEdge and can use some examples in Progress to connect to SQL Server? So within OpenEdge, so one thing to keep in mind is that the OpenEdge driver is supplied from DataDirect as well. This is traditionally an add-on product to SQL Server. OpenEdge does have a SQL Server data server, I believe. It also has an AVL to ODBC bridge. So there's a number of ways you could integrate with SQL Server as well. I would need to double check on that. I don't believe that the data server leverages this driver, so you're not going to get a lot of those same performance benefits potentially. But it certainly could. You could certainly use the AVL bridge and plug it in, no problem as well. So something we can definitely look at though, and I can follow up with you as well. And that seems to be it for the questions at the moment. So that's it from me. I want to thank you all for joining me today. And again, I encourage you all to take a look at the on-demand versions as well. All of this will be posted to our web, and you should receive a follow-up email from us soon with that link. So thanks, everybody, very much for joining me today, and I hope you all have a great week. Thank you.